I went to AA, and I went to AA for a long time. I picked up dozens of chips. I've worked the steps with multiple sponsors. And, I'd say just recently, within the last few years, I've kind of gotten away from the whole sobriety date thing. And here's why. And you might agree with this, you might not. This is what I believe. I've had some people agree, I've had some people disagree. I don't care. Your program might kill me, my program might kill you. I've got to do what's going to keep me sober today. And that's what's most important. So for me, there has been multiple times where I've relapsed. And the thought of having to go back into a meeting and turn my chips in and pick up a new chip and start the calendar all over again has kept me away from going back faster than I should. I've never seen anybody not relapse because their sobriety date. I've never seen anybody not relapse because, oh, well, I've got 5 years and, I don't really want to start over. I mean, plenty of people have went out with that amount of time. I've seen way too many people not only not come back, but die because of the shame of having to go back and start the calendar all over, because you go back to a meeting and you raise your hand and say that you relapsed, and some old timer says, oh, you threw it away all for nothing. Dude, I've been in recovery for 17 years. I didn't lose anything. You cannot take away what I've learned in every step meeting, with every cup of coffee I've had with the sponsor, with every counseling session that I've been in, with every conversation I've had with, somebody like you guys or listening to it. You can't take that away from me. It's just an arbitrary number that I decided to put on the calendar. And recovery is the only thing that we do it with. We don't look at somebody else and say, well, how long have you been a Christian? How long have you been working out? How long have you been doing that? And it's like, if you're on a diet and you've been dieting for 6 months and you eat cheesecake on Saturday and pizza on Sunday, you don't negate all the weight that you lost over the course of 6 months and have to start all over again on Monday. Guess what? It's still Monday. I was talking to somebody and they were like, oh, well, I had 95 days of sobriety and I drank last night. I got to start all over again. I was like, no, you didn't lose anything. Guess what? Tomorrow's still day 96. Please don't let anybody tell you otherwise, because I've seen too many people die and not even come back because of that shame. What do you think? What's your take on that?
You know what? I really wanted your perspective because I found it solid in the book. And I think that's a really great way of looking at it. I know for me, when I fell off, I, like, even in the midst of the fall off, reached out, got a hold of people, actually got a new sponsor because of that. So for me, it didn't affect it, but I could see for people with a different, lack of a better word, fragile nature maybe about it. Mm-hmm. Like, because for those that maybe are watching and listening, don't know that, there's so much shame that goes behind our addiction.
Yeah.
So
I'm not saying that everybody should drop their sobriety date, but if it's not, I know a lot of people that don't do it. I didn't know there was a world of people that are sober that don't keep a sobriety date. But there's still, because there's this new hybrid of addict. There's this new hybrid of addict on these designer drugs, and they're a hardcore junkie, and they're also an alcoholic, but they can't follow the traditions of the AA program, and Narcotics Anonymous just isn't giving them what they need. And they don't really know where they fit in, because they go to a meeting and some old timer that's a straight up junk tells them to sit down, don't talk about those things. Or you can't talk about that in a meeting, go call your sponsor. And there's this new hybrid of addict that doesn't really know where they belong. And there's a lot of people that are taking other avenues outside of the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, because the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous are getting watered down with everybody that's ever gotten a DUI or a pot charge.
Sure.
They just aren't real addicts and alcoholics that they describe in the big book. Yeah. And they don't belong there, and the meetings are getting watered down. And, what's working for me might not necessarily work for somebody else, and that's okay. It doesn't have to.
Yeah, that's funny you say that. Well, in one of my last in-person meetings is a guy that jumped on because we give the option of Zoom and in person. He's just like, I'm just here because I got a DUI and it's court order. It's like, well, then just don't waste our time, man. It's like, well, I'll listen. I think I'll get something out of you guys. It's like, oh, okay, whatever. No, I think it's good. This isn't, more people need to understand seeking your sobriety isn't a one size fits all, really, like in Carlos Vieira's book, Knockin' Doorz Down, that inspired the podcast. For him, it wasn't that. He had to find something else. We had a friend of mine on that I made when I worked in professional wrestling as a commentator. For him, never attended one. Been sober 5-6 years now, So I think it's really good that you pointed out. For some people, sobriety date does, because maybe that checking on the calendar is a good thing. Like, man, look what I've done. I'm accomplishing something. You know, I'm seeing that I've accomplished this. I did it one day at a time. And for other people, like for me, people ask and I go, I don't remember. I don't remember. I know it's over this amount of time or whatever. So yeah, I think it just doesn't, it's not a one size fits all.
There are things that I track progress to. Don't get me wrong. You know, I've got my calendar where I track my workouts and I know when I went to church, and I've got my journal so I could see when I did my devotionals. There are things that I track, and that's very important. But for me, the sobriety date's just not one of them, because it's not a get out of jail free card. But if something happens, I don't want to beat myself up thinking that, oh my gosh, I have to start all over. Like, I'd rather just wake up and like, okay, it's the next day, something happens. Let's just keep moving forward, because that's all any of us have is today, right? I mean, it's a running joke of sobriety. Who has the most sobriety? The person that woke up the earliest that day, you know? and you know, whether you have, you know, I know plenty of people with 5-10 years of sobriety, 15-20 years of sobriety. I'll go to a noon meeting and I'm like, oh yeah, I've been sober 15 years. Today's my third meeting. I'm like, it's 12 o'clock.
Wow.
Like, if that's what it takes for them to have 15 years of sobriety, that's great. And that works for them, but that might not work for everybody. That's not personally the way that I want to live my life. I've had sponsors that say, you know, you need to go to a meeting every day. I've had sponsors that say, oh, I didn't get sober to live in meetings, you know, and guess what? They're both right. And that's the wonderful thing about it. It's not a linear path to the top of the mountain, and it shouldn't be.
Well, and it's just like, you know, when you talked about spirituality, I know for me, I had to come to it in a different way. And that's the thing that people, I think, get wrapped up in a little too much as well, is, you know, well, you're Catholic. I don't believe that. Cool. Don't have to.
Yeah.
I don't have to. You know, one of our guests recently, Sonny Mayo, you know, the guitar player in the new metal rock world. And for him, it was when he started praying because one of his dogs was about to pass away. And that's where he found it. He's like, oh, wow, I did pray to the God. I prayed to that God to watch over my dog. I found it. I found, you know, and so it's just, yeah, sometimes I think people get it wrapped up even in the dogma of the program a little too much to really look inward, as opposed to stop looking to outside solutions for inside problems.
Yeah. And even being a Christian, I don't like when other Christians say the only way to get sober is through Jesus Christ. I don't believe that at all.